Hey everybody! So today I wanted to do a review of this Pilot Frixion Ball heat erasable pen. I've been hearing about these for a long time, and so I wanted to try it out and share with you what I thought about them so that you can decide whether or not you'd like to try them for your embroideries. So today I'm just going to be doing an in-depth review, and I wanted to test out a couple of different colored fabrics. Normally when I embroider, I use Sulky Wash Away Stabilizer for more intricate designs, and I just transfer that with a micron pen, or I use these Leonis water-soluble markers. These are great. They erase really well. You just have to rinse your embroidery off with them, and I have found that the blue does not normally come back as long as you thoroughly wash it, so I really highly recommend these normally in my videos, but I did want to see about these pens because they are a little bit different and some people might like these a little bit better. So my first thing that I liked about these pens is that they are fine tip pens compared to this water soluble pen. They have way finer of a tip, which I think is great for more intricate designs. So I went ahead and drew a heart on here just so you can kind of see the difference between the two. What I wanted to test out is the eraser on this pen. It actually does come with an eraser, and on paper it does erase. I will show you really quick. So if I scribble something here, it erases pretty easily, but again, it does leave a little bit of a mark on the paper. So if you're gonna use these for other purposes besides embroidery, they might be nice if you're writing something down and you make a mistake, but as you can see, it still leaves that yellowish hue to it when you erase it. So let's see if anything comes off on fabric. So I'm just gonna make a line here on both of these, and let's see. All right, so it actually is erasing on this fabric. The one thing I am noticing though is that it's balling up the fabric and it's making it rough, so it's kind of like destroying the surface of the fabric a little bit, which isn't really ideal. So maybe don't erase with these. Let's try this white one. Okay, I'm actually surprised. So I went ahead and drew a simple heart design on a couple of different colored fabrics just to see how each of them handle the heat erasable pen. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use the iron now. I have it on the linen setting, kind of like between the cotton and linen setting, because all of these are cotton or linen, and we'll see how they disappear. So I zoomed you in here so you can see what's going on. The first fabric I'm going to show you is the white. These have ghost lines and they're kind of a yellowish hue. So white fabric doesn't do super well with this. I don't know how well it's picking up on camera, but I can easily see that the design is still there. The next one is this yellow fabric, and naturally I cannot see anything, probably because those ghost lines are about the same color as the fabric. The pale pink one here, which is like stuck to my ironing board, I cannot really see any of the lines on this one either. I think it's just dark enough to where it's kind of blending in. The next one is this canvas, and I can slightly see the lines, but it's nothing crazy. I think if you had an embroidery over it, you probably wouldn't ever notice that. And then this last one here, you can slightly see a little bit of ghost lines, but again, nothing crazy. So it erases pretty well on any sort of fabric that isn't white fabric. So now I want to test out how these designs will disappear if I embroider on them and then iron the design off. So I went ahead and cut myself a new piece of white because that white showed the pattern way too well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and draw a couple of more hearts on here, and Then I'm gonna go ahead and stitch them, and I'll show you how they look after I iron them off. And I'm purposefully kind of gonna stitch around the lines and leave a few of them showing, so that way, because sometimes when you're embroidering, you're gonna have a couple of stencil lines show through unless you're extremely careful about it. So I will try and stitch a little bit off of the design, so that way if there is a little bit of a design showing, we can see how obvious it is. Okay, so I stitched this simple design on each one of these fabrics, and I tried to leave a little bit of the marks to show through just around some of the corners of the hearts. I don't see any sort of lines on the yellow one at all, so that erased really well. And for this one, again, I don't really see any lines, so that's great. For the pink, that looked like it erased pretty well as well. And surprisingly, the white one, I don't see any lines. And this was one that I really tried to leave a few lines out, and I'm not really seeing anything. And I left, like, there were some lines that were peeking through right here, and I can't really see them now. And for the red one, I don't really see any ghost lines at all. This was the one where I kind of could see a little bit of a light halo around it, but I don't really see anything there either. So with this simple test of like simple stitches, I feel like it passed my test. Now, if you're gonna draw on a piece of fabric and you're gonna not stitch on it, like you made a mistake and you wanted to start over again, it probably will ruin your fabric. You're probably gonna have some sort of ghost lines, but I feel like as long as you're following the stencil and being careful to cover as much of it as you can, this seems like it works pretty well. So the last thing I wanted to do is put all of these in the freezer, because I've heard that the lines will come back on some of these fabrics if they are exposed to colder temperatures. I'm also gonna just mark them. I'm just gonna do a line on each one of them, and I'm gonna erase it, and then we'll see if it shows back up, because I feel like it's gonna be a little bit harder to see through the embroidery, but I could be wrong. So I left these in the freezer for about an hour. I could have left them longer, but I figured I would probably see something if I left it that long. And as you can see, it showed up really well on the canvas and the white, and it also showed up a little bit. I had been drawing hearts on this one, I think before I drew the line. I don't really see the line on there, but I do see the heart that I previously drew on that one. So the marks do reappear. These ones, not so much. I got a little bit of like iron debris on there, but those ones I didn't really see the marks as much, but they do reappear. So I would say if you are planning on shipping your embroidery, or if you live somewhere that's really cold, or you don't store the embroidery somewhere that is climate controlled, then the marks could potentially reappear. However, I don't really see any sort of marks around the actual embroideries, so that's good. Quickly, just wanted to go over some pros and cons. I really like the fine tip of these pens. It makes it a lot easier to transfer more intricate details to the fabric. Compared to a lot of water-soluble pens, the tip is much finer. The other thing is that the color of the pen is pretty bold. It's easy to see your design once you transfer it, and sometimes when you're using blue water-soluble pens, it can be a little bit harder to see the design on fabric. The other thing is that you don't really have to worry about any sort of ink running or bleeding on your fabric when you're using these pens, because they do indeed disappear for the most part. Some other methods like Wash Away, Sulky, and Pellin Stabilizer, or any sort of stick-on stabilizer, uses either a permanent marker or you have to print out your design with printer ink, and that can run you the risk of basically staining your fabric when you wash it off. So you don't have to worry about that as much with these pens. The final reason I really like these pens is because you don't have to wait for your embroidery to dry after you've washed away the design. So with a lot of water-soluble markers and with stabilizers, you have to thoroughly rinse off the fabric. You can't just dab it or the marks will reappear. So you have to wait for your design to dry before you can frame it or finish the back of it or anything. But with these pens, you can just make a swipe with the iron and then you can go ahead and finish your design. So I think that's nice because it kind of speeds up the process. The cons of these pens, there's just a couple. The pens definitely leave ghost marks on your fabric after you iron them. I did try to leave the iron on for an extended period of time onto the fabric, especially on the white fabric, to see if that would affect the marks at all, and it didn't. So the marks definitely stayed. So I would just keep that in mind and make sure that you are really staying on your stencil. I don't really feel like I noticed any sort of marks around the stitches. The stitches kind of tend to hide those marks as long as they're not super far away from where you've stitched. So I didn't really see that much of ghost marks around the white fabric as long as you stick to your stencil. The next reason that's kind of a con is that the marks can reappear in cold temperatures. So you really have to be careful if you live in a colder climate or you plan on shipping these embroideries, because you're not always going to be guaranteed that they're going to be climate controlled, or if you're storing these embroideries in somewhere that doesn't have heat and you live in a cold area. So definitely keep that in mind. Obviously for personal work, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but if you're selling these things, there are things that are kind of out of your control when it comes to the temperature that your embroidery would be stored in. And then the final con is that the eraser on the pen doesn't work very well on fabric. If you make a small mistake, I think that you could potentially erase it a little bit, but I don't think it's guaranteed that it's going to completely go away. So you could still have some kind of mark or error on your fabric. And it also kind of pills the fabric. So I wouldn't recommend using the eraser a whole bunch on fabric. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I hope this kind of provided clarity for you as to whether or not you want to give these pens a try. I personally would recommend them as long as you keep in mind some of the pros and cons and the different fabrics and how they work with them. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I have a ton of free content and tutorials here on YouTube, and I also have a ton of free patterns and embroidery tutorials on my website as well, and I'll leave the link below. Thanks so much.